The National Prosecuting Authority says it's determined to hold those involved in state capture to account. The National Director of Public Prosecutions, Shamila Batohi, says they've prioritized 9 corruption matters for enrolment within the next 6 months. For more on this, we talk now to the Deputy National Director of Public Prosecutions, responsible for operations, strategy and compliance. That's Advocate Anton Du Plessis. Advocate, thank you very much for your time. Before we talk about these 9 seminal cases that Shamila Batohi spoke to the committee about in Parliament this week, I want to start off with the extradition processes that have been underway for South Africa to try and get the Gupta brothers to South Africa. Last year, the United Arab Emirates ratifying an extradition treaty with South Africa, and this year, Interpol issued a so-called red notices for Atul and Rajesh Gupta, and this was to try and smooth the path for our authorities to get these people to South Africa. Do you have any development on that front?
Well, good morning, Xoli. So I think it's important to know that, of course, extradition is a process which involves many role players, from the police to your executive authorities, to your foreign affairs departments in South Africa. It's DIRCO, the National Prosecuting Authority, and the ID in this case also plays a role. But at the moment, the matters are with Interpol. As you know, as you said, the arrest warrants and the red notices have been issued. The key issue now is locating where these suspects are. While we may have some inclination to that, that needs to be determined. But the groundwork has been put in place. So the extradition treaty has been signed. We have the regional and the Commonwealth scheme of extradition that we can rely on. So we've done the groundwork. We've engaged with our colleagues in the other countries, and as soon as the red notices are given effect to, we're confident that the extradition process can proceed. And can proceed without too much delay. But unfortunately, it is at this stage out of the hands of the National Prosecuting Authority because the matter is currently with Interpol with those red notices, as you said. But we have done the groundwork to make sure we can move as soon as possible.
Just quickly before I move on from this case, quite correct indeed that this process driven mainly by the Department of Justice, but the kind of detail as to why you want these people brought back to South Africa, that kind of detail, my understanding is that it would come from your side, the National Prosecuting Authority. In those papers, what do you want the Guptas in South Africa to answer to?
Well, as you can see, there are a number of cases, and it's complex. You know, there are a number of people that have worked with them allegedly. And as you can see, even today in court, there are a number of applications we've brought to make sure that at least the assets are restrained and that the cases are built. We've seen recent cases of the full bench of the High Court dealing with. So it really isn't one case or one person. It's a number of associates. And we've put the case strategies in place so that when the extradition request is made, and we hopefully get these suspects back to the country, not only will the case strategies be in place for the prosecutions to begin, but the assets would have been restrained so that we can move ahead with not only bringing to trial and bringing to justice these suspects, but also getting back the money that was allegedly stolen by them and many of their associates.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk then, whilst on the subject of state capture, let's talk about these 9 prioritized cases that Shamila Batohi told the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services this week, describing these cases as seminal, and they will talk to the heart of state capture. I'm just paraphrasing some of what she had to say there. Are you able to give any more detail about who might be implicated here or what these cases are primarily about, entities, that kind of thing?
Xoli, we don't discuss the details of our cases publicly until they go to court for obvious reasons. But as we said in Parliament this week, these are seminal cases in the sense that they struck at the heart of state capture, and state capture struck at the heart of the rule of law in this country. So they are cases that are informed by the evidence. We we are not driven by public pressure, or we don't decide on which cases to go to pursue because of the Zondo reports, or which cases not to pursue. But we have the evidence in these cases, and the reason why we're calling them seminal is they are cases that are at the center of what we've seen to be state capture over the past few years. We've seen it coming out of the various reports, excellent reporting that's been done by journalism. And just to say that it's a broad spectrum of cases that really goes to the broader dimensions of what we've seen at state capture, both from the private sector, but also from the public sector.
Yeah. Maybe let me try and direct your attention to at least one element or one entity that was described as one of the key sites of state capture, and that is Eskom. You have met with them in the past week, and the understanding is that you have been collaborating, and in fact the description there after your meeting was that this meeting was simply to try and tighten that information sharing exercise or process that has been going on anyway. Talk to us about these collaborative efforts to fighting serious crime within Eskom.
So we met with the CEO, Andre de Ruyter, and his team, and as you say, it's a long-standing collaboration. But now that the fourth report has come out, and we are moving ahead with our collaboration on these cases, it's to make sure that there aren't any gaps, to make sure that the capacities that they have, that they've been able to bring in, and the investigations that they've been able to do, that there's a seamless relationship between our process. Of course, we're independent. We have to do our work independently. We have to investigate. We have to do the investigations have to be done independently, as well as the prosecutions. There's no way in this country, considering the nature of state capture, that we can fight this battle alone. So it's not only with Eskom. We're doing it with a number of other organizations. You would have seen, even with the State Capture Commission this week. We're making sure that we are collaborating appropriately in line with our mandate, drawing on each other's resources. And I think it's an important message that this isn't a haphazard shotgun approach. It's a coordinated approach between the various agencies and various entities in this country in line with their mandates. And so the recognition that the crimes that have allegedly been committed at Eskom and continue to be committed are undermining South Africa's development prospects. So this strikes right at the heart of the future of our country. And if we don't end impunity for these kinds of crimes, it's going to be very difficult to stick to the development trajectory and the commitments we've made as a country. So the NPA's role in that, we understand, is vital, and collaboration in that context is, of course, central to any successful process.
Yeah. We're going to touch on independence in a moment, which seems to be almost a constant refrain, and I wonder if it raises any worries about your independence. But just very briefly, before I move on from this element about the 9 cases that are likely to be prioritized, the other element of that is that you intend to enroll these cases within the next 6 months. Surely there's got to be work that is building up to that 6 months. We won't see all of them being enrolled in 6 months' time. What kind of timeline are we looking at here?
I think it's important to note, Xoli, that it's not like we've been sitting on our hands as the NPA since the National Director came in 3 years ago. I mean, these cases take time to be developed. Worldwide, these types of complex corruption cases take time. You need to put the foundation in place. It's not a linear process like a normal case where you have a statement and then a docket. You have to build major case strategies. And I think the notion that nothing has happened on state capture is just simply incorrect. Not enough has happened. That is correct. But a lot has happened. I mean, we've charged 65 people under state capture cases through the ID alone in the last 3 years. We've enrolled over 20 cases. We've declared over 80. We've frozen 5.9 billion rands worth of assets. And all of that has laid the foundation for what's able to happen now. I know the public's frustrated. They need to be frustrated. We're extremely frustrated because this is complex and it's difficult. But the reason why we're speaking about the next 6 months is because the plans that we've been putting in place, and of course, we had COVID, which also scuppered a bit of our planning, and the Zondo report, which was delayed several times, also had an impact on that. We're confident now that over the next 6 months, the plans we've put in place, the collaborations we've developed, and the case strategies that we've designed, also now with the new leadership of the Investigative Directorate, that these cases will be enrolled within the next 6 months, as well as the other cases that have already started, that we're going to see a major shift in sentiment in this country, that the The idea that impunity is something that's going to continue for these crimes, that is simply going to end. And we're seeing it end already. You're seeing it week by week. You're seeing the wheels of justice starting to turn forward. And I think the public, despite their frustrations, can get a sense that justice is going to win again in this country. It's just going to take a bit of time.
Yeah. You've triggered something in my head now, talking about frustration. How frustrated was the Eskom CEO when he met with you guys?
He was not frustrated. He was concerned. And he, as we say, we've been speaking for quite some time about these matters. And his concern is that if these levels of impunity continue, it's not possible for Eskom to do their job, and it's not possible for the country to grow. So there's a level of frustration at the fact that these crimes continue to occur, and that some of the alleged perpetrators continue to not to face justice. But also an understanding that these are complex things. And Xoli, let's remember, it's not an excuse. It's really not. But we started this struggle, if you like, 3 years ago. After 10 years of capture, both seeing the impact of what that did in Eskom and other institutions, but it did the same thing in some ways in the NPA. And we've been rebuilding, redesigning, and there's still certain things that need to change. For example, the legislative framework needs to be improved. We need some additional funding for additional specialized skills. But I think the general sense that we all had at the end of the meeting is that despite the challenges, despite the enormous challenges, our collective rebuilding efforts are starting to pay off. And the next 6 months are not only important, I think they are crucial to the future of the country. So when we make these commitments, we don't make them lightly. We know the consequences of not bringing these cases to court. We know the consequences not just for the rule of law in this country, but for the future of the country more broadly.
Final question to you, Advocate Du Plessis. You spoke about additional funding, and that prompts the question around the credibility of the NPA, the independence of the NPA, as you continue to look for more sources of funding. The understanding is that you are not averse to accepting donations. So, who has donated monies to you in order to aid your work, and does that worry you about independence and credibility?
Our independence is sacrosanct. It is the main priority for us to make sure we protect it at all levels against any interference. Executive, media, it doesn't matter. We have to act independently, because as soon as that goes, even the perception of that goes, then we've got serious problems in this country. And of course, when it comes to our sources of funding, that is vitally important, that we make it very clear that we act fearlessly, we act independently, and we don't act on anyone's behest. But the reality is, in the nature of the complexity of the crimes we're dealing with, the type of stakeholders that we have to engage with, and this is a worldwide phenomenon, that the fiscus is not going to have enough money over the coming years to be able to provide that kind of support. And we don't believe that it has to all come from the fiscus. Of course, in the majority of the funding will, but for years the NPA has received funding from the private sector for its rape care centers, for a whole range of initiatives. And this is a worldwide practice, and it's not something that's new in South Africa for a number of government departments. But moving forward, we are absolutely aware of the risks of the perception. So what we've done is we've set up what we've called a donor oversight committee. We're engaging extensively with National Treasury and the Department of Justice to make sure that any money we do get in, and we haven't needed to draw on funding at this stage, but we do believe in the future that we might have to. And it's not just about funding. It's also about collaborating appropriately with the private sector to bring in the right skills we need, digital skills, financial and forensic skills. We're going to have to be, as our minister said, bold and innovative in terms of how we fight this problem, because corruption is not going to go away in the next 6 months or next year. And corruption and organized crime, the nature of these crimes we're facing, will be with us for a long time. We have to be smarter at how we fight these crimes. We have to be more collaborative. But of course, all the way through, we have to protect our independence to make sure we can continue acting independently and fearlessly. And that's something I think South Africans right now in 2022 can be proud of. No one controls the NPA. The ubiquitous taps of corruption are being turned off in this country. That's why the contestation for space is happening in such an aggressive way. It's not a sign of a failing state, Xoli. It's a sign of a state that's starting to regain its stature and to regain its confidence. And I think watch the next 6 months, and I think we're going to have a different discussion by the end of this year.
Advocate Anton Du Plessis, one of the deputies to the National Director of Public Prosecutions.